හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Monday the 18th of December 2023. Can developed. President stresses liaison with Japan for the conclusion of the Greater Kandy development project as it enters its final phase.
ආරම්භ කරේ ජයිකා සංවිධානය එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවා. ඒ නිසා ඉදිරියට යන්නත් අපි දැන් ජපානය එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවා.
Health arrest. Former Secretary to the Health Ministry arrested over substandard immunoglobulin controversy as heads continue to roll. Simple process. Sri Lankan Ambassador for Science and Technology stresses that investment processes need to be simplified to attract high-value foreign investments.
Develop a process that means the investor can go through the process quickly within a week.
Musical chairs. Two new independent MPs, including Gia Pires, side with the opposition as election party boundaries take shape.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
නියම මෝල්ට් සාරය සමග මැලිබන් මෝල්ට් දැන් රුපියල් 750ක් පමණයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to AdaDerana's English News. First at 9, I'm Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our news stories for the day, starting with our top story right now. With focus on the improvement of infrastructure, facilities and services in Katagostura, Kandy and Kundasali, the Greater Kandy Development Plan was discussed between the President and certain members of Parliament today. With the project having been implemented in 2017, the delays as to its conclusion were discussed in detail with the deliberation on how issues can be resolved taking centre stage.
A discussion on the development plan for Kandy City was held last morning at the Presidential Palace in Kandy. The final draft of the Greater Kandy Development Plan was discussed with focus on the improvement of infrastructure, facilities and services in Katagostura, Kandy and Kundasali,
which has given its lifeblood and soul as its unique identity.
මොකද මේක 2017 ඉඳලා ප්ලෑන් කරගෙන ආපු වැඩසටහනක් ඒක කූට ප්‍රාප්තිය වෙලා තියෙනවා මේක පුළුවන් ඉක්මනින් අපි කරනවා නම් මම හිතන්නේ මුළු මහනුවරටම විශේෂයෙන් වැදගත් වැඩසටහනක් කියලා හිතනවා.
ඉතින් මේ කියපු ආකාරයට 2048 දක්වා සම්පූර්ණ ව්‍යාපෘතිය ගියත් දැන් අධිකරණ ජනාධිපතිතුමාට ප්‍රධාන කොටස් ටික විශේෂයෙන්ම මල්ටි මොඩල් හබ් එක ට්‍රාන්ස්පෝර්ට් ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් සහ ග්‍රිඩ් සිටි ඩෙවලොප්මන්ට් එකම අපි කරගත්තත් ඒක මහනුවරට සහ බෝගම්බර විශාල ජයග්‍රහණයක් වෙනවා.
Main issue is to upstream in Mahavali. We may have to have a dedicated reservoir. If we are going to look at development up to 2048 and beyond, you see upstream Mahavali somewhere we have to look for a dedicated reservoir for water because we cannot respond because we have all this problem with the irrigation people trying to share water.
Multi-modal transport hub එකට මේගොල්ලෝ original plan කරස අවුරුදු 3ක් යනවා මේකට කියලා. අපි කිව්වේ දැනටමත් good shed එක අවුරුදු 3ක් තිස්සේ මේ dismantle කරලා නගරේ ලොකු අර්බුදයක් තියෙන නිසා මේක shift දෙකක් දාලා හරි මේක අවුරුදු මාස 18න් කරන්න කියලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අදකන් උනා මාස 24කින් කරන්නම් කියලා.
මේ වාර්තාවේ අපිට concept plan එකක් දීලා තියෙනවා. සංකල්පයක් තියෙනවා. දැන් අපිට ප්‍රධාන කාරණයක් තියෙනවා මේ ආරම්භ කරේ ජයිකා සංවිධානය එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කළා. ඒ නිසා ඉදිරියට යන්නත් අපි දැන් ජපානය එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරනවා යලිත් මේ වැඩසටහන් සියල්ලම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන යන්න. අපි ඉතින් ජයිකා සංවිධානයේ මේ ගැන වැඩ කටයුතු කරන්නට පැමිණෙනවා. ඉතින් අපිට අපේ කෙටුම්පත හදලා ජයිකා ආයතනයේ එක්කත් සාකච්ඡා කරන්න සිදු වෙනවා. එක කාරණයක් කියන්න ඕනේ. අපි මේක හදන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා මොකද්ද ලංකාවේ ජනගහනය මොකද්ද කී දෙනෙක්දයි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මහනුවර දිස්ත්‍රික්කේ තියාගෙන රවුෆ් හකීම් මන්තුමා කිව්ව ජලය ඒ ටික අපි බලන්න ඕනේ අනික සංඛ්‍යාව වැඩි වුණොත් පරිසරය වෙනස් වෙනවා පරිසරය වෙනස් වුණොත් එතකොට මේක නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
The former Health Secretary Janaka Sri Chandragupta, who was arrested this afternoon over the controversial issue of importing substandard human immunoglobulin, has been remanded till the 27th of December by the Malika Kanda Magistrates Court. The arrested former Health Secretary was produced before the Malika Kanda Magistrate Court and legal proceedings in relation to the incident are currently advancing. This development comes in the wake of a CID complaint lodged by an advisor of former Health Minister Keheli Rambukwala on his behalf, with regards to suspected malpractice within the ministry. The former minister was subsequently reassigned prior to the spate of arrests that followed.
Following the controversial issue of the import of substandard human immunoglobulin, former Secretary to the Ministry of Health, Janaka Sri Chandragupta, was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department this afternoon. This arrest was made after interrogating him for nearly 4 hours. Meanwhile, a protest was staged at the premises by officials of several civil organizations against former Health Secretary Chandragupta. The arrested former Health Secretary was later produced before the Maliga Kanda magistrate Lochani Abevikrama this afternoon. These developments were made following the allegations of the import of substandard stocks of immunoglobulin, where in late October an investigation was launched into the controversial issue of purchasing and distributing substandard human immunoglobulin within the hospital systems of the country, with a legal case also established in the Maliga Kanda Magistrates Court. Later, the owner of the pharmaceuticals company in question, Sudhat Janaka Fernando, Director of the Medical Supplies Division, Dr. Kapila Vikramanayaka, and 4 other officials were remanded. Meanwhile, on the 14th of December, the Maliga Kanda magistrate Lochani Abevikrama declared that the actions of former Secretary to the Ministry of Health, Janaka Sri Chandragupta, in the process of purchasing vaccine doses was suspicious to the court.
In a bid to strengthen bilateral ties between the two nations, Sri Lanka's Speaker of Parliament, Mahinda Yapa Abewardena, arrived in Delhi in India. The trip aims to facilitate further discussions and collaboration to assist Sri Lanka's recovery and foster stronger bilateral ties. Meanwhile, highlighting the economic interdependence between both countries, India has provided $4 billion to Sri Lanka to recover from the crisis situation, which was extended to address the financial and humanitarian issues of the country. In addition, as a close neighbor of Sri Lanka, India has demonstrated a deep interest in supporting the country amidst the recovery from the economic crisis. The Sri Lankan Ambassador for Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Bandula Vijay, said that due to the complexity of the current investment policy in the country, many possible investors are not willing to come into the technology and ICT industries. Joining the At Hyde Park with Indivari Amawata program, Dr. Vijay further stated that a substantial investment, both foreign and local, can be expected if the government streamlines and simplifies the process. As the country is emerging from the economic crisis, Dr. Vijay stressed that the investment process is a key area the government should focus on.
Talking about the IT and tech industry itself, in the line of attracting investments, what kind of a stable policy environment can we create in Sri Lanka?
One of the problems that we have faced in the past, and probably is not solved yet, is somebody who is coming from outside to invest in Sri Lanka. The process is very, very complex, very complicated. And the rigmarole that you have to go through in order to get the various approval processes, it's really discouraging the people who come to invest here. And in the past, I know 2, 3 or more companies who have wanted to come here, want to invest, want to produce and develop things here. And as they saw the whole process, they backed out and they didn't do it. And so what I propose to various governments that have been in place is you have to come up with simple policies, some simple paperwork that you just fill in the blanks and go through the system, but develop a process that means the investor can go through the process quickly within a week and get the approval to establish a factory. So in order to bring the know-how, bring the technology, bring the investment to do some things like this. But the government has to make these policies fairly simple, clean, easy to do. And once you do that, I think that this process will accelerate rapidly.
How much of an investment are we looking at if these companies come into Sri Lanka?
So the investment could be anywhere, substantial. So that will come from local as well as overseas. But that's not the difficult part. The difficult part is how can we go through the system, the administrative, complicated system, in order to make this happen. I think that the government should look at very seriously and make it a simple process.
During a meeting of the newly appointed Cricket Selection Committee, discussions pertaining to the captaincy of the Sri Lankan squad through the one-day international and T20 matches were underway. Accordingly, SLC has confirmed that the final agreements reached with regards to the captaincy is yet to be presented to the Minister of Sports, Harin Fernando, for approval.
A meeting of the new Cricket Selection Committee chaired by Upul Tharanga convened at the Sports Ministry today. The meeting was also attended by Sanat Jayasuriya, who was appointed as cricket consultant of SLC's High Performance Centre. According to the Sports Ministry, strategic plans of the new selection committee aimed at reviving Sri Lanka's cricket was discussed at length during the meeting. In the meantime, the newly appointed Cricket Selection Committee convened another meeting at the SLC premises during the afternoon. Discussions focused on the selection of the Sri Lankan squad to represent the country at the Sri Lanka-Zimbabwe series, scheduled to commence on the 6th of January 2024. Meanwhile, former Sri Lankan cricketer and current cricket umpire Kumar Dharmasena stressed that Sri Lanka must work according to a plan set out for at least a span of 10 years in order to revive cricket.
මම දකින්නේ නම් ඔළුමුගෙඩි මාරු කරයි කියලා නම් සිලෙක්ෂන් කමිටි එකේ ලොකු වෙනසක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා සාමාන්‍ය අවුරුදු 3-4කට පස්සේ සිලෙක්ෂන් කමිටි එකක් වෙනස් වුණාට කමක් නැහැ. හැබැයි මම පෞද්ගලිකව හිතනවා ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් තියෙනවනේ අවුරුදු 10ක. ඒ කියන්නේ අපේ කණ්ඩායමේ නායකයෙක් හදනවනේ නායකයා අනුම ගානේ අවුරුදු 5කටවත් නායකත්වයෙන් දරා ගැනීමට හැකි නායකත්වයට සුදුසු පුද්ගලෙක් කෙනෙක් තමයි අපි හොයාගන්නවා. දැන් අපි කරන්නේ ඊළඟ 2027 World Cup එකට හොඳ නායකයා හොයාගන්න.
Meanwhile, the general meeting of the Association of Cricket Coaches Sri Lanka, which was established yesterday, convened today.
උපුල් තරංග, ඩිල්රුවන් පෙරණ, තරංග පරණවිතාන, අජන්ත මෙන්ඩිස්. අපි දන්නවා ඒ හතර දෙනාම අපි මේ 2010 ඉඳලා 2020 වෙනකන් ක්‍රීඩා කරපු ක්‍රීඩකයෝ. අපිට නැති වෙච්ච දේ තමයි ඒ අත්දැකීම්. තේරීම් කමිටුව ගැන මම පූර්ණ විශ්වාසයක් තියෙනවා. මොකද මට සහතික වෙන්නට පුළුවන්. මොවුන් ඉතාමත් හොඳ ජොබ් එකක් කරાવી කියලා.
In other news, independent parliamentarian members Professor G.L. Pires and Dylan Pereira says that they are ready to support the main opposition of the country, Samagi Jana Balawege, in the upcoming election and help implement the current program successfully on immediate basis in the future. With that, let's look at what happened on the political stage today.
පොහොට්ටුවේ සම්මේලනයක් තිබ්බා. ඔබතුමත් පොහොට්ටුවේ 69 ලක්ෂය කියලා හැම වෙලේම කියනවා. අපි බැලුවා සීට් එකක ඉන්නවද කියලා හිටියේ නෑනේ.
ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මහත්තයාත් දැනන්නේ නේ. 69 ලක්ෂය දුන්නේ එතුමාටනේ. එතුමත් එතන නෑ. අපිට ජනවරම දුන්නේ මහජනයා. රට ගොඩ ගන්න වැඩපිළිවෙලක් හදන්න. ඒක නෙමෙයි සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා සමගි ජන බලවේගයේ සමග අන්‍යෝන්‍ය විශ්වාසයකින් යුක්තව මේ පොදු වැඩපිළිවෙල ජනතා සුභසිද්ධිය වෙනුවෙන් ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමේ ඒක ඉතාමත් හදිසි අවශ්‍යතාවය. කල් දාන්න බෑ.
ආණ්ඩු පක්ෂයෙන් කියන්නේ රනිල් මහත්තයා තමයි පෝලිං ටික නතර කරේ. ඔව් ගෑස් පෝලිම නෑ. හැබැයි දැන් ගෑස් පෝලිම නැතුණාට ගෑස් ගන්න සල්ලි නෑ. පෙට්‍රල් ෂෙඩ් එක ගා පෙට්‍රල් පෝලිම නෑ. හැබැයි පෙට්‍රල් ගන්න සල්ලි නෑ. ඉදිරියේදී පැවති ඕන මැතිවරණයකදී සජිත් ජනපති අනුර අගමැති හෝ අනුර ජනපති සජිත් අගමැති කියන ස්ලෝගන් එක දාගෙන මේ පක්ෂ වල එකතු වෙන්නේ කියලා වෙන සියලු කාරණා පැත්තකට දාන්න. ඔය කියන බලවේග දෙකෙන්ම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ජනතාව මේ වැට් එක ගෙනල්ලා ජනතාව ෆ්ලැට් කරපු මේ ආණ්ඩුව ෆ්ලැට් කරලම දාන්න.
දේශපාලන නායකයන්ට විවිධ කතා කියන්න පුළුවන්. කට පියාගෙන හිටියොත් සද්ද නැතුව ටැක්ස් එකත් අඩු කරලා, බඩු මිලත් අඩු කරලා, ලයිට් බිලත් අඩු කරලා නවත්තලා තිබුණු සියලු ව්‍යාපෘති දැන් ඔන්න ජනවාරි මාසෙ වෙනකොට පටන් ගන්නවා. එතෙන්ට යනෝ මිසක් සුරංගනා කතා වලින් මේ රටේ ජනතාව නැවත මුලා නොකළ යුතුයි කියලා එවැනි පිරිස් වලට ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න කැමතියි.
A total of 17 individuals were taken into custody following a special raid operation conducted in Kotahena this morning. Meanwhile, several suspects were also arrested while in possession of several narcotic substances. With that, let's take a look at more news from across the island in brief.
15 suspects were arrested in the Kotaheni area today in possession of heroin during the special raid operation Yuktiya, which was launched yesterday under the directives of the acting IGP Deshabandhu Tennakon. 2 more individuals were also arrested in possession of crystal methamphetamine. The special raid operation was conducted by 68 police officers, 75 army officers and 22 officers of the Special Task Force with the assistance of the police canine unit. Meanwhile, several individuals were arrested during a raid conducted in the Marandaghamula area in the Ulapitiya. Accordingly, 4 suspects while in possession of narcotic substances, another suspect with crystal methamphetamine and a suspect with cannabis in possession were taken into custody. Further, a suspect concealing a firearm at his residence was also arrested by police. In the meantime, a parcel weighing 3 kilograms and 330 grams, suspected to be narcotics, was found floating on the beach of Kalutara North last afternoon and was later recovered by residents of the area. After informing the police of this, police revealed that the suspected parcel will be forwarded to the government analyst for further investigation.
Welcome back. Indices in the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in red as a result of price losses in counters such as Melster Corp, National Development Bank and Hatton National Bank, with the turnover crossing 445 million rupees. The CSE All Share Index dropped 0.65% to close at 10,672.69 points, falling for the 4th straight session. Expo Lanka Holdings and LOLC Finance were the top losers on the index, falling 2.12% and 2.22% respectively. Trading volume on the index fell to 22.5 million shares from 53.9 million shares in the previous session. The banking sector was the top contributor to market turnover, while the food, beverage and tobacco sector was the second highest contributor. Equity market turnover fell to 445.8 million rupees from 508.9 million rupees in the previous session. Foreign investors were net buyers, purchasing stocks worth 64.1 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 411.8 million rupees. Now we have Sajani Devapura from Capital Alliance to share a few thoughts in our next segment, Markets in View.
Regarding the domestic equity market, we saw the ASPI decrease 52 points to 10,742 last week, while the S&P 20 showed a slight decrease from 3,102.99 to 3,102.64. Last week's total market turnover increased to 3.8 billion LKR, rising 4.9% with comparison to the previous week, owing to the increase in domestic participation. Furthermore, the Executive Board of the IMF completed the first review of the Extended Fund Facility arrangement for Sri Lanka. The IMF has approved the release of the second installment totaling around $337 million under the Extended Fund Facility. Moving on to the Treasury bill and bond auctions, the weighted average yield was 14.07% for the 2026 bond and 14.32% for the 2028 bond. The weighted average yields for the 3 months, 6 months and 9 months Treasury bills were 14.59%, 14.29% and 12.83% respectively, showing a fall in interest rates across the board. Furthermore, at this week's Treasury bill auction, the government aims to raise 172.5 billion LKR, with interest rates expected to reduce further. Then, on a global front, markets witnessed oil prices rise by over 3%, boosted by a weaker dollar and due to the International Energy Agency lifting its oil demand for the next year. Furthermore, gold prices, on the other hand, touched a 10-day high on Thursday last week as Fed hints at lower US rates next year.
With that, let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies as the day progressed. US stock futures look to open a few ticks higher while the US dollar steadied at the start of the week. Oil prices have spiked as a result of Houthi militants attacking vessels on the Red Sea. This and a closer look at global markets right now.
US stock futures look to open a few ticks higher while the US dollar steadied at the start of the week, which includes a Bank of Japan policy announcement and a key reading on US inflation. Additionally, a reading on core personal consumption expenditure index due on Friday is forecast by analysts to rise 0.2% in November, with the annual inflation rate slowing to its lowest since mid-2021 at 3.4%. Analysts suspect the balance of risk is tilted to the downside, and a rise of 0.1% for the month would see the 6-month annualized pace of inflation slow to just 2.1% and almost at the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Markets reckon the slowdown in inflation means the Fed will have to ease policy just to stop real rates from rising and are wagering on early and aggressive action. New York Fed President John Williams did try to temper some of the expectations on Friday by saying there was no talk of easing by policymakers, but markets shrugged off his remarks. Iranian-backed Houthi militants have stepped up attacks on vessels in the Red Sea, which on Monday pushed up shares in big shipping companies, particularly in Europe, on the view that they may increase their rates in response, which resulted in oil prices rising, although skepticism around Russia's plan to cut exports in December limited gains. MSCI's broadest index of world shares dipped 0.1%, S&P 500 futures inched up 0.2%, while Nasdaq futures added 0.1%. The Pan-European stock index traded largely flat after its fifth straight weekly gain on Friday, its longest streak since April. Maersk shares rose as much as 4.7% in Copenhagen before paring some of those gains and following an almost 8% surge on Friday by Italian shipper D'Amico. Germany's Hapag-Lloyd and Norwegian oil tanker Hafnia gained between 4% and 6%, also extending last week's surge. The Bank of Japan's policy decision on Tuesday will likely be the main event in Asia this week. April was favored by 17 of 28 economists as the kickoff for negative rates to be scrapped, making the BOJ one of the few central banks in the world actually tightening. South Korea's main index closed 0.3% higher, showing no obvious reaction to reports that North Korea had fired a ballistic missile off its east coast.
Oil rose by more than 1% on Monday as attacks by the Houthis on ships in the Red Sea raised concerns on oil supply disruptions. Although ample supply and skepticism around Russia's plan to cut exports in December limited gains.
A Norwegian oil vessel was attacked in the Red Sea on Monday, and oil major BP said that it has temporarily paused all transits through the Red Sea. Other shipping firms said over the weekend that they too would avoid the route. Brent crude futures were up $1.40 or 1.8% to $77.95 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude rose 80 cents or 1.1% to $72.23 a barrel. Both crude benchmarks posted small gains last week following 7 weeks of decline after a US Federal Reserve meeting last week raised hopes that interest rate hikes are over and cuts are on their way. Even so, despite the rally, Brent and US crude remain in contango, a structure in which oil for prompt delivery trade at a discount to crude for delivery later, suggesting a well-supplied physical market. Also adding support, Russia said on Sunday that it would deepen oil export cuts in December by potentially 50,000 barrels per day or more, earlier than promised as the world's biggest exporters try to support global oil prices. This comes after Moscow suspended 2/3 of loadings of its main export-grade Urals crude from ports due to a storm and scheduled maintenance on Friday.
Welcome back. Mediwave, the digital healthcare arm of WaveNet, partnered with 1990 Suvasariya in a bid to elevate life-enhancing emergency care through mixed reality and artificial intelligence. In the meantime, Sri Lankan Airlines is poised to become one of the first airlines in South Asia to introduce eco-friendly carpets on board its aircrafts after a successful trial. With that, let's take a look at our corporate news segment for the day before we get into our internationals.
In a groundbreaking development, Mediwave, the digital healthcare arm of WaveNet, headquartered in Singapore, partners with 1990 Suvasariya, Sri Lanka's national pre-hospital emergency ambulance service, to elevate life-enhancing emergency care through mixed reality and artificial intelligence. Together, a fully integrated ambulance, powered by Mediwave's integrated emergency response suite, was launched in Sri Lanka. Mediwave's emergency response suite automates and enhances the efficiency of the emergency healthcare ecosystem by digitizing critical processes, ensuring swift response times, all the while delivering specialized care remotely along with Microsoft HoloLens. In a pioneering move, Sri Lankan Airlines will become one of the first airlines in South Asia to introduce eco-friendly carpets on board its aircraft after a successful trial. The eco-friendly carpets, sourced from Lanka Textiles in Switzerland, will help Sri Lankan Airlines reach another milestone in its journey towards a reduced carbon footprint through gradual fuel efficiency improvements. The carpets are lightweight and assembled from regenerated nylon made from material typically headed for landfill such as abandoned ocean sea fishing nets, better known as ghost nets, aquaculture nylon waste, used carpet waste, used fabric waste, and fabric scraps from mills. In the meantime, the Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture and Plantation Industries, Janaka Dharmakirti, has been appointed as the chairman of the state-owned dairy producer and marketer, Milko Private Limited. This appointment has been made by the Minister of Agriculture, Mahinda Amaraveera, to fill the relevant position which was left vacant following the resignation of Renuka Pereira as the chairman of Milko. Accordingly, the Agriculture Minister has assigned the duties of the Milko chairmanship to Dharmakirti in addition to his current position as the Agriculture Ministry Secretary.
That's all the news I have for you for this evening. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same place, for your Premier English News. Right now, this is Jonathan Benedict bidding you a blessed week ahead. Good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.